everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. Hope everyone is doing well tonight on this rather interesting day here, getting towards the end of February. Hope everyone's doing well. It's about 60 degrees today here in New Hampshire, so that was a nice welcome from the usual really cold weather. But hope everyone's doing well. This is Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. We do a weekly live stream show every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We talk to people, various Bigfoot researchers, other folks as well about Sasquatch, other cryptids, usually Sasquatch, but for folks tuning in, that's sort of just the spiel. That's how we do it. So good to see everyone and hope everyone is doing well so far. So really excited for tonight's show. We'll get into announcing that in just a minute here. If you haven't seen, previous episodes, we have a lot of shows coming up. We've had a lot of shows in the past. There's actually a link in this video description below. You can watch it. This is stream number 90. So we are getting almost to 100. So that's pretty awesome. We had a really cool show last week with Tristan Yolton from Washington State, listening to some of his pretty peculiar audio. He has some really crazy audio that I've listened to since that. Very, very interesting. We're going to have him back on, as well as Jay Birch, who's going to join us for the chat in beginning of March, I believe, around mid-March. We're going to have them both on, and we're going to listen to this full 16-minute audio clip with this really interesting stuff. So if you want to check out some of the sounds that Tristan has, go check out last week's episode. As for next week, we will be joined by Patrick Vaughn, researcher. He's been on a lot of the other live stream shows. Should be really interesting. Patrick seems like a very interesting guy, really nice guy, and a great researcher. So definitely will be interesting to talk with him. Also this week, just a little Small Town Monsters news. The Kickstarter campaign is still going on. There's a link to that below if you want to help support some of the Small Town Monsters projects while also getting cool rewards and being kind of interactively part of it, getting your name in the credits, DVDs, shirts, stickers, all that stuff. You're not just contributing, you're actually kind of being a part of it. So I think that's pretty cool. That's down in the description below. But coming later this week will be the latest Beyond the Trail episode that we were filming down there in Florida. It will be about the skunk ape. It's going to be called Beyond the Trail, the sawgrass skunk ape. Should be really exciting to show that and kind of show what we found down there. I'm excited. I've been, kind of finishing that project up and editing it with Eli as well. So that should be great. But as for this week's show, let's get right into that. So tonight we're going to be talking to Mr. Robert Leiterman. Really excited for this. So Robert worked 5 seasons as a seasonal park aide with the California State Parks and Anza-Borrego Desert State Park, as well as worked 2 seasons with the National Park Service at Crater Lake National Park in Oregon, which is absolutely beautiful, beautiful spot. But he was a seasonal law enforcement park ranger and wildland fire suppression. That's what he was tasked with while he was there. We'll get into all that with him. But he became a permanent California State Park Ranger in 1987, continuing that for 30 years in Central and Northern California. And his first involvement in Bigfoot field research was in September of 1999, when he followed up on a daytime sighting at Humboldt Redwoods State Park. He's been a member of the BFRO since 1999, as well as the Bluff Creek Project since 2010. He has authored 9 books, including his latest from 2021 about the Bluff Creek Project and their quest to rediscover the Patterson-Gimlin Film Site. Robert was named Bigfooter of the Year by Daniel Prez's Bigfoot Times in both 2011, along with Steven Strufert, and received the title in 2021 solo. So he is, as of now, Bigfooter of the Year currently, so that's fun. He has worked on worked on and been featured in a number of documentaries and TV programs over the years, including Bobcat Goldthwait's Willow Creek, $10 Million Bigfoot Bounty, Knievel's Quest. I have so many questions about that one. In Search of Monsters, Finding Bigfoot, and most recently our Beyond the Trail, Bigfoot at Bluff Creek film. So lots to talk about. Robert's a really nice guy. So without further ado, let's just bring Robert right in. How you doing, sir?
Good. Yeah, thanks for letting me talk.
Absolutely appreciate it. I mean, I've got to meet you this past summer. As I mentioned, you were in our film, and I got to meet you and a bunch of the other Bluff Creek dudes, as well as Tate, a lot of other people that I've known from online. So it just felt natural to bring you on, and you obviously have the new book and everything out. So I'm sure we'll get into talking a lot about that.
Right.
Awesome. So your bio is pretty interesting, right? You started out sort of, I don't know, was there an interest in Bigfoot from a young age, or was this just something that coincided with your career as I kind of read in your bio?
I say it's something started a long time ago, back in the family Ford van. I think it was a 1967 van. We went to see the movie called Legend of Boggy Creek, and it was night. It was dark, where I had 5 brothers. So you imagine, like, there's 6 boys, and then
Right
mom
on.
and dad. So we're all in this van watching the Legend of Boggy Creek, and then next thing you know, you got to go pee, and then you have to go. Yeah, I got to go pee. So you're like, how am I gonna pull this one off in the dark movie theater? So but it was a great movie. I think I had to go pee before the bathroom scene.
Right.
I can't remember. Yeah, that'll be the last thing I want to do is, of course, at the movie theater is like a long line of stalls. It's not like the ones now where you're like in this booth that's kind of made of plastic. So it was a bit different back then. But
I can imagine.
I guess that would be where it kind of started, in a way. Started with that, and kind of changed. It wasn't until after college that, after I had more time to read things I wanted to, I started diving into it a lot more and reading more stuff. But at college, I was supposed to be, getting an education instead of reading all this stuff about Bigfoot, these mythical creatures and everything. So after college, I started doing a little bit of homework on it and doing some research, because I was going to put together an interpretive program about Bigfoot.
Oh, cool.
So as a park ranger, one of our responsibilities, at least in California, is interpretation, where we do interpretive stuff as well. We have resource management, interpretation, search and rescue, law enforcement, managing of the seasonals, running campgrounds. But one of those functions is interpretation. So we put together either a walk or a slide presentation of some kind, and then we give it to the public. And
right
I decided to go ahead and do a Bigfoot, as long as I didn't state my opinion and had enough entertaining things to talk about. The management was okay with it. And so I did that for a few. So I guess that kind of got it started. But I guess the first time I decided to do any research, it was kind of happenstance. It was like Humboldt Redwoods State Park in, I want to say, 1999. And I think it was September Labor Day weekend, when John Freitas showed up with the pickup truck with that big old ship speaker attached to the back of his vehicle. Yeah, they used to call that call blasting back then.
Yeah, that's right. Call blasting.
So he shows up, he's a real professional, he wants to talk to the Rangers, and he identifies himself, and he says he's with the BFRO, and they like to go call blasting looking for Bigfoot creatures. And I was like, no, because in the park, it's one of the 3 busiest times a year, and call blasting in the park is probably not a good idea.
Right.
On a holiday weekend. And it's also, we have these two animal species that are protected. Excuse me. We have a spotted owl during the nesting time periods, and a marble murrelet. Spotted owl is a large owl that likes old growth forests, and marble murrelets are kind of a pelagic bird. They spend their daytimes out in the ocean collecting food, and they come back early morning hours. And they show up early morning. They leave early morning hours, and they come back late at night. And then they pretty much nest in old growth forests down in this section of the woods. Farther north, they'll settle for cliffs. But that's the 2 species that are kind of protected. And there's a period of time where they're still considered nesting, and you can't just go over and blast sound while they're trying to nest. And that was in that window. So no, can't do that. So sent him on his way. And they also told me that there was a sighting in the park, and that took place on August 23rd. I didn't get to go take a look at it till September 23rd. And that's kind of, I did an investigation to see what was there in terms of follow-up based on a photograph. So I was able to take that photograph and go, oh, that looks like it. Go up the hillside, and sure enough, there's a stump and trees. And so the report was a dad and son were walking on the river trail, which kind of pretty much crosses over on the other side of the campground, on the other side of the river. They're after a walk. The kid's shoes untied. Dad says, tie your shoe. Dad's waiting for the shoe to be tied. He looks up and he sees half naked upper, looks like a hairy human guy up in the hillside, walking back and forth, and then rubs his back against a tree.
Wow.
And the rest is history. Yeah, I am following up on that in September 23rd. Did a little investigation on it, and then I kind of wrote it up and sent it off to Matt Moneymaker, and then there, I guess I had my choice: the blue pill or the red pill, and I guess I took the red pill, and at that point I got involved with the BFRO, And I kind of started it pretty much, mostly investigations. Later on, I got involved with the expeditions, but
Yeah.
there you kind of have it. That's how I kind of got suckered in, so to speak.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that is such a cool area for folks that haven't been there. I mean, the Humboldt Redwoods State Park is one of the few, state parks or parks in California that still have some of that old growth redwood forest, which is just absolutely amazing. And I think I mentioned this to you, but this past summer when we were driving through there, when we were coming up to the annual sort of Bluff Creek hangout there with Tate and Eli and myself, we came a few days early, but we stopped through Humboldt Redwoods because I'd been there once before and I just loved it. We were kind of asking some of the staff around, and they started talking about this ranger guy who was into Bigfoot. And Tate said, "Was that Robert Leiterman?" They said, "Yes, that's the guy." So they had remembered that you were into the Bigfoot and had brought Bobo around a couple times. So I thought that was really cool. But what an area. I mean, was that one of the only sightings that you actually investigated directly in Humboldt Redwoods, or did you kind of over the years start hearing about other ones in that particular area?
Well, prior to that, I heard about other ones. I remember, I can't remember exactly how I met Daniel Perez, but I think it was somehow it's a correspondence, or maybe he drove by the park. I can't remember now, but anyhow, because he had this newsletter and I subscribed to it, and I wrote an earlier article for him, and then there was this report I shared with him about the story was about a Bigfoot coming down to my house near the truck stop, which is kind of opposite direction I'm pointing, and this person reported that she saw it early morning hours climbing through, picking up pieces of scrap metal, and I kind of said I don't think so, not up this way, but anyhow. So the story gets moved around. So I actually invited Perez to come meet her, and she didn't want to meet him actually at the time because the story was bogus and she was called on it. And
interesting.
The fun part was actually bringing Daniel Perez down for it. It's like you go over and you have your fun, try to tell a story, and then the guy you tried to make fun of brings a researcher down and introduce you to him so you could tell him the story. And it kind of, she didn't like that, but that's okay. Paybacks are fun.
Yeah.
And so that's the first time I met Perez. And while we were driving around, Perez was talking about different locations in the park that he had heard stories about. One of them was the Caltrans employee, early morning hours, Old Dark 100, driving down the avenue and saw something run in front of his car, described as a Sasquatch creature.
Wow.
And that was one of those things. And then I also talked to him about other reports that I heard about, over the time periods, which is always fun, exchanging stories. And that was probably the first time I really got serious about looking into investigations was probably Perez. And that was about 1999 and 2000. Because
wow.
if you look back, who was the first guy you run into, talking about Bigfoot? And I have to say, well, probably Perez would be the first guy, and then eventually, John Freitas, and then Matt Moneymaker, and then Bobo Fay.
Yeah.
Once Bobo heard I was in the park, he called me up. I can't even remember the conversation he talked about. He goes, "Yeah, I called you up, and I said, hey, you want to go out and put some cameras out or something?" And I don't even remember that conversation, but yeah, but we've been friends ever since that time period. So it's funny. I got to tell you this story. This story's a good one. I probably already shared it. But Bobo comes by time to time, and it's always nice to introduce him to some people while I was here. So he dropped by the Humboldt Redwoods Interpretive Association's Visitor Center.
Yeah, it's a great little spot.
Some of the directors there. It was kind of nice. And I said, Bobo, there's this guy I want you to meet. I'll set it up. So he goes, sure. So on this day, we visit this. We pretty much visited the visitor center. He got talked to people, and then I took him over to this trailer park that's kind of in the park near we area. Yeah, so I talked to this guy's mom. I said, hey, on this date and this time, I'll be bringing Bobo by, but don't tell him. It's going to be a big surprise. She goes, okay. So now we're at that date, right? So I'm hiding behind the door frame, and Bobo's standing in front of the door, and I'm knocking on the door, and I'm waiting for this gentleman to answer the door, but he doesn't. He's probably about my age, but he's kind of lived with his mom. And so she answers the door and she goes, "Hello, can I help you?" And it's just like, "Oh, I'm Bobo. Hey, I'm here to see the guy." He goes, "Well, he's kind of sleeping right now." Like, oh, so I popped out from behind the door frame. Says, "It's me. It's in uniform, park unit outside." I go, "This is the date we talked about." She goes, "Oh." I go, "Well, can you wake him up?" It's starting to rain.
Well, you're up there in the in that area. That's you're kind of in that rainforest area, right? Is it technically rainforest where you're at?
Yeah, it's kind of hard here without that rain out here. You got to lean in. It's kind of a rain squall we're having, but I don't know if you can still hear me or not.
I can hear you. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can barely hear you. I'll suddenly get bigger. There.
There we go.
I can hear you better. Watch your lips moving.
Are you technically in the rain? You're technically in the rainforest area up there, right?
So she kind of invites us in. So she kind of invites us in, and we're kind of waiting in front for everybody, waiting for him to come out of his room. Well, when he finally does, he comes out, and he sees us standing there, and he recognizes me, but he looks over at Bobo, and he looks at me, and Bobo, he goes, "No way, no way, no way." So we talked for about 30 minutes, and he got a chance to meet the legend, Bobo. Because when you tell people you know Bobo, and you don't know if they really believe you or not until you show up with them, right? Yeah, so it really made that guy's day, which is pretty good.
That's funny. That's a good one. That's a good feel good kind of story. Always making someone's day like that. And Bobo's a nice guy. He's the kind of guy who would definitely cheer you up if you were having a bad day. But can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna put the ears on, so I'm gonna plug this.
Sure. I'm gonna take this moment to just say hey to everyone in the chat. A lot of folks. Sharon says hello, everyone. Greetings from Belgium. How's it going? Thanks for tuning in. Jay Fritz, how are you doing? Joe Turi. We've got Brian and Chewy Go Hiking. Hello, chat. Hello, Alex. Hope all is well. Look forward to listening tonight with Robert. Absolutely. How you doing? Tateronimus says this better be a good guest, Alex. Yeah, definitely. Glenn H. Cindy Finn, how's everybody doing? There's a lot of cool folks in the chat for sure. We've got Jeremiah over at the Bigfoot Society. Good evening, Alex and Robert. What is going on? Kevin Hamilton, good thing I set an alert to remind me this was on. It's holiday in Canada, and I still thought it was Sunday. Man, sometimes it just still feels like the weekend, even though it's not. It's unfortunate. What's going on, New Hampshire Sasquatch? My eyes. Hey there, Ryan Carboy says, "What's up, Alex? You did a great job with the latest STM mini doc in Minerva. Keep up the great work." Hey, I appreciate it. We've got some new ones coming out for sure. JP Merrick, hi, fellow Bigfoot enthusiasts. Lockbeard, how are you doing? Lots of people in the chat. Who am I missing here? I saw Patrick Vaughn pop in at one point as well. Mothman 46, Bigfoot Anon. What is going on? Central Florida Bigfoot. What's up, Matt? Donald Fuller, how's it going? And everyone else as well. Hope you guys are doing good. I'm not trying to leave anyone out. Just a lot of folks in the chat. So thank you all for tuning in as always. So continuing on, Robert. So we were kind of talking about that Redwoods area. Now, obviously, you've been working now with the Bluff Creek Project for quite a while. And as I mentioned earlier, I got to meet you up there. And you just put out a book on the Bluff Creek Project. Now, how did you end up getting involved with the Bluff Creek Project, and ultimately, how did your path end up taking you to the Patterson-Gimlin Film Site?
Oh, well, I'll start out by saying this is I was interested in the phenomena. I was interested in the research of it, but I wasn't really that interested in the film site because it happened in '67. It's a long time ago. So what? What's the big deal? It's been a long time. But I guess in 2003, I got a chance to speak at the symposium. And I was like the Friday lunch guy where you get to eat your salmon and listen to me make jokes about Bigfoot. I guess that's what it was. And that's the time I got to meet John Green. I got to actually walk up to him and say hi. That's always funny when you go up to meet somebody. It's like, oh my God, that's the guy, And you're trying to be really cool about it. But I walk up, I got this little press on it, and he looks at me like that, and he thinks I'm going to interrogate him. So I said, oh, no, I got this from Matt Moneymaker. He probably stole it from a bunch of other guys, you know. And so we chatted. About the only thing I wanted to say was, how are you holding up? I didn't want to talk about Bigfoot because I figured that's the last thing he wanted to talk about. So we kind of small talked, and I thanked him and I walked off, going, "Wow, this is great." I saw this guy dressed like a cowboy-ish down by the down the floor. I guess that was Bob Gimlin. I didn't know who that was. Somebody had to tell me who it was. Like I didn't like when we were up there in Willow Creek area, and Bobcat Goldwitz was over there, and I didn't know which one he was. So he had to go, "That's the guy over there." Yeah. So he opened his mouth and made these weird noises, like, "Oh yeah, that's probably the guy." But then also Christopher Murphy, I got to spend some time with him because he was at the very top, and it was like the bleachers. And I was sitting there just kind of checking everything out, and he was sitting there, and he had this binder with him. So I started chatting with him and found out that he shared with me the stuff that's in his binder, which became the book in 2004, I think it was. It's Meet the Sasquatch. I think it was the first one. And we actually used his book as a Bible up in the mountains looking for the film site. A lot of information was helpful. Some wasn't, but a lot was. So that was good. So that was kind of the start with that. And I think I kind of lost your first question. I kind of, woo. So what was your
No
first
worries.
question you're asking me to get to?
I'll ask in a moment. I do just want to say hey to Todd Hale, who says, "Tell Robert what's up. What's going on, SoCal Squatch?"
Hey, Todd.
Good guy.
Cool.
So yeah, I guess my question was, you ended up there at the film site. Now you said, how did you kind of end up working with the Bluff Creek Project? As you mentioned, you weren't that interested in it. What kind of caught your attention with the PG film then?
Yeah, I'm sure glad you're taking notes. When you turn 60, you kind of forget a few things, like
no
shiny
worries.
objects or whatever. Yeah, well, at first I mentioned didn't care about the actual site. 2000, the big confusion. Actually, Steven Stroifert likes to call it that, where they couldn't all agree upon where they thought it was, and that was in 2003. About 2007, during the 40th anniversary of the film site, Yamron put on a little mini symposium thing. I attended that. That's where I met Steve Stroifert, and that's where I got to meet all the other players. So Steven was writing an article, so I was his informant. I was one of the California crew. There was a lot of us California BFRO crew guys were there. And so I talked to him about it. And then eventually we ended up talking around the campfire at Louse Camp. And that's when he had kind of mentioned about this mission to find the film site.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that's good luck with that, And then later on, about 2010, that's kind of when I got hooked up, because I started doing videography stuff and investigating things. With a lot of the stuff I did was with what goes that name? Woo! A lot of stuff I did was with Bart Catino. We were doing investigations on a variety of things, and I just thought, it would be great to be able to film these guys, him and this guy named Ian or something, film these guys at the film site while they're looking for the film site. I go, great, I can just put that videos up on the BFRO YouTube channel. I can give it a name, I can do some audio work with it. So that's kind of how it started, where it was like September of 2010. I was the guy just filming everything they were doing. And I got to meet Ian Carton. And that's when I started watching these guys, asking them questions. And then all of a sudden I got to thinking, I go, how hard can it be to find this place? And then I guess after about a few adventures with them, I'm like, okay. And I started asking questions, and then I started, looking into it. And I learned so much from those two guys. Those guys were pretty much zealots. I guess you want to call them that. They're film site zealots. They went out there, reading everything they could, looking at stuff, speculating, trying to figure some stuff out. And I learned a lot from those guys. Next thing you know, it's like, in front of me was this blue pill or this red pill, and I guess I took the red pill, and then I become a member. So now instead of two guys researching it while some guy with the camera films them, now it's three of us researching. So we come up with a fancy name for it, and that's pretty much it. And as time progressed, it took us about 2 seasons to figure out where it was. And the third season, we brought Bill Munns down, and we got Prez to finally go show up there. And then the rest of that is just, it was kind of cool, taking people there, introducing to them. And then we started doing camera project as well, getting people putting out wildlife cameras and then seeing what comes by to see who's utilizing that area. There's a lot of game trails that run through it.
It's amazing. I mean, to
And one of
see
those,
some of those efforts that you guys, and I just want to reiterate the point. I don't know if we mentioned it, but for folks that aren't familiar with, you mean rediscovering the film site. The film site was actually lost for a number of years. So the Patterson-Gimlin Film Site, folks, had kind of been taken over by nature. Do you know what year it sort of fell off, where people weren't able to find it? Because I know it was within 4 or 5 years afterwards, where there was DeHinden and others that were going there. But at what point did they kind of lose track of where it was?
I'll say prior to 2000. If I were to guess, I would say, this is just a guess on my part, but around the 90s, 95-ish.
Okay.
There wasn't getting a lot of traffic. There's a guy who passed away. He's a member of our group, but it's Mike Mraz.
Right.
And he had been going there, and he actually met Renee DeHinden at Laos Camp. Renee showed him what the site was in the, I want to say the late 80s, early 90s-ish, somewhere around there. Amazing. And so evidently, Mike Mraz had a general idea where it was, and he was going there a lot, but he stopped going there about, I want to say about the early 90s, about 95. But I also want to say this too, that in our process of looking for it, not Bob Gimlin, I'll get to his name in a second, but Cliff Brackman and Bobo Fay had taken me to that general area in 2007. And in their minds, they were pretty sure that was the area based on the trees in the background. And I was shown trees. I can't tell you which ones they were. And Bob Gimlin also felt the DeHinden's X area looked pretty familiar.
Right.
And so that's an area where so there's 3 guys who've been helpful in the process who have given us information. But our job was to confirm it beyond reasonable doubt. And to do that, you needed to have these landmarks like the trees, the stumps, and everything else. So you have these guys who are going by how they feel about it based on whatever reason it is. And some people want to say, oh, well, they knew where it was. Some people want to say they didn't know where it was. But in my mind, they had a general idea, but that wasn't confirmed until we confirmed it. And that was kind of our goal with that.
And
so that way I could keep everybody happy.
Right. No, and you guys absolutely confirmed it. I mean, it's funny when we put out our Bigfoot at Bluff Creek film, and we have those sequences of Rowdy showing exactly where things are and trees and frame, and there's all these people in the comments who will then say, "Oh, well, that looks nothing like the film site. These guys don't know what they're talking about." And I find that hysterical because 1965 to 2021 at that point, that's a long time. I mean, it's been over 50 years. So you have entire trees that have grown into the film site in areas where obviously, post-flood, 64 flood and 67, that wasn't there. So I found that really interesting. I did just want to read this one kind of humorous comment from Patrick Vaughn, who says, "Robert reminds me of Les Stroud."
It's funny you say that. I've got the picture on one of his covers. He's wearing that bandana on his head.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I took a picture of myself with the bandana on my head, and I get the same pose, and I put it on the kind of the group we hang at, the Squatch Team 6 is a lot of the Bluff Creek members. They go there to chat back and forth. So I put that up just for fun. But yeah, somebody else had mentioned that too.
Brian and Chewy also says, Vaughn, I was thinking the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Somebody also said, yeah, I remind him of Robin Williams sometimes, but.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. I just watched Jumanji recently. So, yeah, I mean, with the beard a little bit, you give me that impression. But Kevin Hamilton has an interesting comment. He writes, "The PG film site is like a nostalgic holy place for many Bigfooters. I'm not surprised so many people want to visit it. It's super historic if you're into the subject." Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I didn't get there until 2021, despite having been to Willow Creek in, I think, 2015, my first time. But getting to the film site and seeing Laos Camp and feeling that history was to me was really special. And a lot of other folks that I've met that like Tate and others, Jonathan Easley, other people that year after year go by and visit that place, not just the film site, but Laos Camp. And that area is just so wild. And as you were talking about with some of those trail cameras you guys have, you get cougars and bear and all sorts of critters wandering through there. So it's just a really wild place. Now, you guys have kind of, since you confirmed the location, you've been, I don't want to say stewarding the site, but sort of guiding people in that area, sort of, showing them the ins and outs. And how has that, have you seen over the years, there's been more of an increase in people wanting to go visit?
Well, we have cameras that capture people walking down, not to spy on people, but they're game trails, basically. We just want to see what's going in. And sometimes we're kind of curious about how many people go down to the film site to check it out. So not a lot of people get down there. Or some people get down to the bottom and get confused, and they don't quite make it there. We hear about that. But it's a very underused resource, and we're kind of glad. But it's available to anybody who wants to go down there. And we don't get a lot of visitors. And the reason I say I'm kind of glad we don't get a lot, because you think about a sensitive area. That whole area in '64 was scoured out by the Christmas Day flood. And then since then, the trees have been coming back in. So it's returning to how it used to be. The river's channel's getting back down to the place it is. So you have all this stuff here. And it was overgrown when we started doing our research. So imagine a place that's overgrown, which kind of protects it from the wind. It protects it from a lot of the elements. You remove those brush areas that allow the wind to come through, to allow the sunlight, to allow the rain to hit things. And when people can go there, they can see these stumps. They can see these logs. We tend to lubber things to death. We tend to like to sit on the logs or walk across stuff. So just the fact that we are there walking around touching things, we're slowly destroying the artifacts. And that's something when I encourage people to go to visit, because it belongs to you guys. It's yours. We kind of caretake it in a way where we make sure the trail is accessible, and we pick up garbage when we see it. And just probably about 2 years ago, Jamie brought down a nice pickup table and constructed it. But I have to say this, Tate helped a little bit. He wants to get credit for it. So mostly Jamie brought the table down and put it together. So now you have a picnic table just past the turnoff of the trail. And that's something that the Forest Service didn't pay for. That's Jamie did that, the bottom of his heart. He pretty much took care of it, and it's there to use. And that's the kind of help we try to do. And after the 4th of July, every July, about the first weekend after the 4th, or starting right after the 4th weekend, we kind of spend about 5 days or so there. We're there, and we invite people to come down to visit, and we give them tours, we chat. And it's kind of nice to share this, because this is a resource that it should be set aside and protected. We met with the Forest Service in the very beginning of our journey, and they didn't know where it was. They've heard about it. So we actually took them there, showed it to them. We met in the Eureka office, chatted with the Forest Service staff. We contemplated, do we need to put a parking area there? Where you can put a bathroom? Where are you going to put an interpretive panel? Do we need to put a marker down there? And anything that you put there could get eroded away. It's not a permanent place. The trailhead is not very big. There's no place for a bathroom. I guess a chemical toilet, you put one there. It'd be like Louse Camp. It'll be an artifact, that needs to, and you go to use it, it's going to smell really nice. Yeah. But we got to be careful down there, and we got to protect the resource the best we can. But we never did come up with an interpretive panel or any of those things. But that was the last we left the talks. We wanted to get the blessing of the Forest Service to be like a volunteer group there, so they know what we're doing. But we never got it. We never got it through. We ran into other things and other obstacles in our way. So what we just take it upon ourselves to make sure the garbage is picked up, to make sure the place looks nice, and to make sure that you can walk down there and access the trail to get there, which is important because people get confused. Right. Now I got a helicopter flying by.
Oh, they're looking for you, man. You've been talking too much. Well, I was going to say, though, I understand, obviously, I've seen that happen in other places, wild spots that sort of get tamed in a way where they'll put in trails and bathrooms and that sort of stuff. And, I understand that, making it accessible for a lot of people. But I think part of the charm of of that entire area. You know, once you get to that, once you're out of Orleans and on the Go Road, just getting down to either Louse Camp or, you know, the film site, the part of the remoteness is the charm, how rugged it is, how, you know, you go in there, it's not a little visitor center. It's nothing, you know, that you would expect in a sort of touristy spot. It's rugged. And I think that really adds to, you know, why it's such an amazing spot. And you go out there and it's real wilderness. You see evidence of other animals and other things, and possibly Bigfoot. I mean, we had some strange stuff happen there. Obviously can't confirm or sort of,
or deny.
Or deny, I guess. It was just very strange things that happen, you know, and that's part and parcel with this sort of topic in general. But regardless of that, I think the way you guys kind of manage it, you're very open about it. I mean, if I didn't know any of you guys, I could go to your website and find out the directions how to get to the film site, or at least Louse Camp, and swim in that beautiful crystal clear water where Notice and Bluff Creek converge. I mean, we spent, I want to say, from about a Monday to a Friday there. So I think 5 nights total, actually, that we were there at Louse Camp, and, you know, one night at the Patterson-Gimlin Film Site itself. It was just such an amazing experience. I mean, I loved every minute of it, from the extreme hot in the day and then 40-degree weather at night, and just exploring that whole area and the history. As I mentioned, it had this sort of magical feeling to it. It really was interesting. So I definitely applaud you guys for what you've done and sort of upkeeping that place. And while you have maintained the trails, you haven't made it to the point where, as you mentioned, the more people come, we tend to ruin everything, right? So it still retains that wild quality. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job just as sort of stewards of that area.
Well, thanks, because we like to remind people that there are a few places that have cell reception, but if you're not in very good shape, or you have health issues, and you drive down that mile and a half down to the berm, you park your car and you hike a half mile downhill, then you hit the flats, and then you hit upstream for another half mile. So you're looking at a mile in and a mile back out. And if you're not in very good shape, you know, you have health problems, there is no cavalry coming. I mean, right. I guess they have to figure out when you're out there, and there are places that have cell reception. It's like right at the top of 12 and 13H. And that big,
that's kind of on the top
area.
Of the mountain, right? So, yeah.
Yes. And that the cell reception places are hard to come by up there. And it took us a few years to figure that out. Of course, leave it to Rowdy to figure out where you can make a phone call. So he got that figured out pretty well. A lot of the areas you can do that. I'm still a dinosaur when it comes to those kind of things, but yeah. So it's a great place, and we encourage people to come see it. And actually, in July, I want to say the 6th through the 10th. I'm off the top of my head, but that we're going to be up there. We're going to be available to give tours. I guess Tate was talking about trying to get some kind of he's calling it a film fest, but
film fest, right?
How you say that? But,
sure, of course, I get that. Maybe just a little, fun projection time or something.
That's basically all it is. It's like, it'll be the 10th anniversary of basically when Bill Munns and Daniel Press came down.
Awesome.
And that's the first time we started inviting people to the film site. So it's the 10th anniversary. Tate wanted to do something different. So it's more like people show up at Louse Camp, tonight we're going to put a sheet up. We're going to, got this computer thing. We're going to watch a couple of movies about, whatever. And I think that'll be fun.
That is fun. I mean, that's kind of what we did. So when Eli, Tate, and I were the only ones in Louse Camp for the first, I want to say it was either 2 or 3 nights. I think 2 nights we were completely just the 3 of us, and then Jonathan, and slowly people started showing up. But the first night, or it was the second night there, we watched Bobcat Goldthwait's Willow Creek there on Tate's projector. Now, I think he either said you gave it to him or Rowdy gave him the projector. I don't remember who, but that thing is pretty much.
It wouldn't be. It'd probably be Rowdy.
I think it was Rowdy. Yeah. So it was Rowdy gave him this projector, and Tate's got this little projector itself. And we watched Willow Creek, which is really cool because, as you know, I mean, you've worked on that film. A lot of those scenes were filmed in the Louse Camp area. I mean, Tate was showing us where certain scenes had been filmed, and there's just a lot of history there. So even if you're into films or, some of the movies or shows, Finding Bigfoot, they were all down there, Willow Creek, all this sort of stuff. So, absolutely just a cool area. And as Tate here likes to say, thanks. I like to think the Bluff Creek Project survived because of me. Oh, Tate. Always something. Tate, he made me laugh with that one. So good job, Tate.
Yeah. Well, Tate, you just keep thinking that. All right.
Oh my gosh, great.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, that sounds fun. So I definitely recommend to people. I mean, if you're on that side of the country, or even if you're thinking of traveling through there, it's so much fun. I got to meet people from all over the place, from other parts of the West Coast. Obviously, I ventured out from New Hampshire. We had Ken Gerhard and some of those guys were up there looking for the salamanders at the same time. It was just a good time. Lots of good people, yourselves and Rowdy and Jamie and all the rest of the gang. Really, really cool. I mean, just a fun time and a beautiful, beautiful location. I can't tell you guys enough how amazing Lost Camp is. And I would just go back there just to swim in the creek again, just because of how amazing and clear that water is.
Oh, that's one of the things I really like to do is people think I'm nuts. Well, maybe I am, but when I go down there, the first day I'm there, I spend 5 minutes in that water, and the second day it's 10, and the third day it's 15, and then no more than 15. But it's really invigorating to be in that cold water and just moving your arms and legs around. I really like that, and it's one of my traditions, and I encourage little jump in the water. When Rowdy goes down, he's so ripped, he's so skin and bones and ripped with his muscles and sinew. Hey, he's in there for a couple of minutes and he turns blue when he gets out.
It's
I've got
cold.
a little extra insulation, so I could stay a little bit longer in the water.
I think I was staying there the longest of anyone because it got hot during the day. I mean, it was in 80, 90 degree range on a few of the days. And a lot of these guys, I'm from a kind of cold climate area, so I'm used to cold. So I was staying in the water while all these, Tate is now a Florida man, can't handle cold, and it's Southern California Eli boy, and Jonathan Easley, SoCal guy as well. They were all like, "Oh, it's so cold," and they couldn't handle it. I'm like, "I'll sit in here for an hour. Just give me a beer, and I'm going to be sitting in the creek all day. See you guys later." But
well, that's good. Yeah, an hour's a long time in that water, but
when it's that hot out, why not?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to go when it's like early morning or late afternoon when the sun's not out. It just makes the air temperatures cooler. It makes the water warmer, and I kind of like that time period. Yeah, it's a weird way of looking at it, but
Now you guys do. So with the Bluff Creek Project, you also do have a podcast, and Tate has mentioned here. I would say that the Bluff Creek Project book and the Bluff Creek Project podcast are pretty cool. Robert's brainchild was the In the Field of Bluff Creek Project podcast. Awesome. So that's sort of a segment that you do. You just interview people right basically out in the field. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. Originally, when Tate and I were talking about the project, Tate brought it up, and he goes, "What do you think?" I go, I envisioned, we'll be out in the field. I got a recorder. It'll be natural ambience. It'll be great. We'll put them in the scene where they saw the pterodactyl attack them, and it'll be perfect. And we could talk about it. But COVID was one of those demons that kind of came by, and so we got a chance to talk to people, which is different, like you and I are doing on the phone. It's quite different.
Yep.
And but being able to talk them in the field, I like doing that. So I've done a few of those, and I guess Jonathan plays the theme song for that. I like what he did with that. So that's his theme song that we're using when we talk about in the field podcasting. Yeah,
it's cool. Yeah, I mean we've done some of them with Tate, and we actually did one at Louse Camp. But it's been awesome. You guys have had a lot of interesting people on, and it's just been fun. It's a great kind of idea. And then when it gets to the book, let's talk a little bit about the book before I take some audience questions here. Because I do see a few interesting questions popping up. So the book, I haven't read it yet. I'm still, hoping to get my hands on a copy here. We just got back from Florida, and we've been kind of running all over the place. But I did have a chance to kind of skim it a little bit. Tate had a copy. Yep. So tell me about the book a little bit, kind of the idea behind it, and what's the reception been so far?
Sure. Well, the whole idea behind the book was the 10th anniversary was coming up, and we've been working on the project for 10 years. About 3 years ago, I started trying to put it all together. And the idea was that we put it all together, and every member of the team got their own little copy of the book. It's like, here you go. Congratulations. Thank you. You're on the team. And everybody got their own book. And that was the whole idea, but somehow it morphed into maybe you could sell them to other people. But the idea of the book was to try to do kind of a journalistic approach to like a travel log. It's like on this date, we did this, we went here. Because I've read a lot of books, and We all think we're special. We all think we can write something totally new that's not like anybody else's stuff. But what I was trying to do is do something a little different than the typical research books. I want to put a little levity, a little stories here and there. And so you can learn about the process that we went through to find the film site or relocate the film site or refine the film site, whatever you want to say. But I also wanted other tidbits in there because there's natural and cultural history. People always ask about sightings, what animals are up there, and putting in a little bit of these little experiences. And it's always scary as a writer to tell people about yourself in a book. Like I'm not going to say which ones, but there's different things that took place, and I wasn't going to use it, but I decided to go ahead and do it. Things that happen to you out in the field. Like I've been in as a park ranger, I've been dealing with people's emergencies for a long time. You never think it's going to happen to you.
Of
or
course.
You're walking on the trail by yourself because, you're not afraid of anything, nothing can get you up there. And you find yourself being followed and almost to a point where you think you're being stalked. And that's it kind of leaves a little mark in your psyche a little bit where, here we are, we're like the predators ourselves. And now all of a sudden you're the prey and you have something following you around. And that's always unnerving. And we all get to experience it from time to time, but I thought I'd share a little bit of that. And I carry a camera around with me all the time. And you think I'd be smart enough to know how to turn it on and film something that's right there in front of you, and you miss it because, well, you turn your camera off in the excitement, or you miss all the good stuff. And that happens to the best of us. And I thought I'd throw those little stories in there. But the idea is trying to get it as a project where every member can participate if they wanted to, and add a little article here and there. So Rowdy gave me an article. I think Jamie gave me 2 articles. Stephen wrote the introduction. Daniel Perez wrote the forward for it.
Oh, awesome.
And it was kind of a nice little project there. And I've been told by some people who are looking at it that I had too many pictures. You can never have too many pictures.
No, you can't.
Connect the dots. Yeah, I got pictures. And I was told by somebody goes, I could have edited 100 pages out of the book. I'm like, well, you guys write your own book. I like having those in there. So the hard part was 615 pages is a lot of pages. I mean, no matter how you look at it. But when I started out transcribing the information, I had to watch all the videos, 72 of them, that I put together for the Bluff Creek Film Site project. And I wanted to keep the narrative how it actually was. So thank goodness for those. I can use those as cross references. And it was like a journal, an audio journal that you're going through saying, yeah, we're going to cover that. No, we don't need to talk about that. We got to cover this. And that was a tough decision, deciding what you want to keep and what you don't want to keep, because I didn't want to have to write volume 2, just to get the rest of the story out.
Right.
But it was a fun project. And the question is, would you do it again? That's the question, and probably I'd probably do it again.
Well, it's cool. I mean, it
fun.
sounds like it's a kind of encapsulation of not only your group and your effort to rediscover this film site, but sort of capturing a little bit of the essence of that search and that area itself. I mean, as Tate mentions here, the full Bob Gimlin interview is in there word for word. And that's one of, from what Tate told me, one of the few interviews with Gimlin actually at the film site specifically. So that's another cool thing. So definitely check that out, folks. So we'll have is the Amazon link probably the best way to get a hold of the book?
Yeah, it was published through Amazon, so that will probably be the best way to get it. Yeah.
Well, I will have that linked below, folks. I don't know if it's in there yet. It might not be, but I will make sure to get on that and put that in the description below, because definitely check it out. I mean, these guys do great work. They really have. And if you're ever in that area, like I said, I think you should look up, their website, and I'm sure even if you reach out to some of them, whether it be Robert or Rowdy or even Tate, they will tell you how to get to the film site. They'll maybe even meet you out there, or just go to that kind of annual Bluff Creek event. So really great group of people. Absolutely. So one thing I do want to get into, and this is sort of as we're talking about, obviously the film itself or the film site, but I do want to take this one question from Todd, Todd Hale, who asked, when Robert is in camp, what's the minimum distance that people should put their tents so no one wakes him up snoring?
Oh, that's just funny. I was up in Washington, undisclosed location area. I was with Todd and a bunch of other guys, and
Oh, right on.
Shane and
That was recently, right?
Vandenberg. Yeah, that was very recently, and it was and Bart and
Oh, those guys are awesome.
the other people. Yeah, well, if you're a snorer and you know
I
you're
am.
a snorer,
I am.
yeah, it's just give your partners a heads up. It says I do a little snoring, no problem, because evidently my wife says I snore. But when you run a digital recorder at night, then you know for a fact that you do a little snoring. And you always try to give lots of space between your tent and the other person's tent, so it won't be too much of an interference. And it's always interesting because I worked in parks for over 30 years, and people go camping, they get a little nervous. So you pick the tent spot as far as you can, just to get a little space, right? But they're a little nervous, so they're going to put their tent near yours for security reasons, and you can't blame them. They're a little nervous about it.
Sure, of course.
And sometimes you just don't have room for places. Like you're on a road, and it's just not a lot of room, so you have to make do what you can. But yeah, it's okay. You know, we all tend to snore a little bit, and just give a little more space in between tents, and it all depends on how big of a snore you're on, whether you're going to want to be 50 yards. Or 150 yards, or just a a good 20 feet or so. But I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, and as Todd says, we recorded 2 BCP in the field last week. Hurry up and edit them, Tate Hieronymus.
Oh.
So Tate, you're being Todd's cracking the whip there, man. You better get on that.
Oh,
that's great.
You know, it was great. This last trip up in Washington, I got a chance to the Olympic Project. 3 guys in the Olympic Project. I should get their names right because I know it's Shane, and it was Todd, and I want to say Chris
Spencer.
I got the names right. Yeah. So I interviewed
awesome
those guys, and they're talking about the nest,
right?
The non-eagle nest. I'm not sure I get that right. So that was pretty fascinating interviewing those guys and hearing it come from their hearts and the research they're doing and the time they spent and articulate how they're going through this whole process of, it's like when somebody asks you a question, you give them some answers, right? And then they call you on it, and then they say, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about. But research takes a process. You don't go up one day and then you're an expert. You're constantly collecting information and trying to compile it and to figure out what it really means. And that's what the Olympic Project is working on. They're trying to compile this evidence that they've accumulated. And they also they got recordings going on. They got a lot of stuff, which is pretty cool. So yeah, so that's going to be a great interview. And Tate's not going to edit it. I'll edit it and I'll send it to Tate. Because if somebody tells you something in confidence, they go, oh, don't use that. Well, you don't pass that recording on to your buddy. It says, oh yeah, it's good. Because then they'll never talk to you again, right?
I hear you, yeah. Tate's just quality control, right? He's the final one before it goes live.
He's the final guy who makes sure everything's going to line up straight. But I like to do my own editing and pass it off to him.
No,
and the other recording we did was, I want to say in 2012. It was in August. Bart had a thermal sighting that he recorded in the Sierras. And I was invited up to investigate it. I had my opinions, because we all have opinions.
Sure. And
so I did a write-up about my opinion. And then Bart says, why don't you come up and tear it apart and investigate it? So instead of going to Washington, and I want to say this was September, instead of going to Washington, we pretty much went to the Sierras. And that's where I met Kip. That's where I got to meet Kip. And we did a big investigation, and we just kind of tore it apart and tried to duplicate what happened. But that was fun. So what hasn't happened is Bart and Todd have not been in the same room talking about that event together, and it hasn't been recorded. So I got a chance to do that around the campfire at the campsite. That was pretty cool. So I'm looking forward to that one as well, because it's just like Tate was there. I'm not Tate. Todd was there. Ro was there. A bunch of other names. I can't remember all. But Bart recorded this. And you always wonder, when people have time to think about something that happened, whether they change their mind or their tune changes or their opinion changes. So it was kind of cool hearing it from them together, because they could play off each other as what was going on while Bart was on top of the hill filming downhill, and Todd and Ro were at the campsite dealing with the sounds they heard, trying to keep the fire going, and just that unnerving feeling of being watched. And when you have that happening at one place, and you have somebody up the hilltop therming downhill through a gap in the trees and seeing a heated figure moving back and forth to a point where there's possibly 3 or maybe even 4 individuals that were moving around the campsite up there. Yeah. And I remember when Bart first told me about it, I was like, are you sure it wasn't a car engine? Sure it wasn't the fireplace? Sure it wasn't the guys there? But being able to investigate it and try to duplicate what happened, that was kind of an interesting experiment. I put videos out on that a long time ago. Like I put out 11, but 10 of them were about that. The 11th one was me walking in the kill site, which is within a quarter mile of that location.
Right. It's a very fascinating spot. I've wanted to get out to the Sierras, not only for kind of the kill site sort of thing, but the Catino footage, which, I've heard a lot about, not only from, some folks that were involved like Todd Hale and yourself, but just it's a very interesting piece and the kind of the backstory. So we're hoping to get out there at some point in the Sierras. Just a beautiful spot. I mean, like you said, you have that kill site, you have a lot of different sort of stories in that area. It's an interesting area, but yeah, the Olympic Project guys are awesome. We went up there to the nest site and hung out with Shane and them, and really solid dudes. And I just really enjoy hanging out with them. They're just a fun group of guys to get out in the field with either way.
Did you, when you're up at the nest site, did you see any feathers?
If we did, we tripped over them because we were getting whipped left and right with huckleberries, and it is a rough area to get in and out of. I'll put it that way for sure. Beautiful spot though. I mean, that part of Washington, the Olympic Peninsula, is incredible. Just like much of the Pacific Northwest, and that's what's so interesting. You get to Bluff Creek and that area, it's kind of the beginning of the Pacific Northwest that continues up all the way almost to Alaska. And just knowing that from that point on, from the Bluff Creek area, even south of Bluff Creek up to Alaska, it's just this contiguous sort of patch of woods and that rainforest that goes along there. It's a crazy thought. It really is. And I mean, that's where a majority of Bigfoot sightings from around the country, vast majority, seem to come from that area. So with that said, I do want to talk about obviously a little bit about the Patterson-Gimlin film itself, given that you guys spent a lot of time looking into that. And I mean, at least the way I interpret it is the whole point of rediscovering that film site, while there are other goals as well, is likely to then be able to hopefully maybe use it to determine if there is any size comparisons or anything like that you might be able to kind of glean. Now, when you see that footage, what do you kind of think about it now that you've gone through this whole process of rediscovering the film site? Has your view changed from start to finish, or is it always evolving?
Well, my view is always evolving as you go through, because when I first saw the film, I looked at it. In my mind, I saw vibrations, I saw muscle movement, I saw all these things. And then you start learning more about it, and then you have this time frame of how do you get all these things done in that day and get that film somewhere. So it kind of puts a little confusion in there on it. But you got to go back to the film itself and say, well, is it real or is it not? And our investigation of the film site is irrelevant to whether there's a Bigfoot or not. It was where the location was. So once we settled that, then we start thinking about, okay, what have we learned from this? Well, we know that Rene took measurements, and he measured from different locations, like a stump here and a stump over there. And if through triangulation, he has a distance that we pretty much know or approximate where Roger's 352 position was.
Right.
So that gives you a location. Okay. Green's was very similar, but Rene that's the one we usually go by. And so from there, you could set up a place. So what we did is that location has eroded away where Roger would have been standing based on Rene's information at 352. It's about 6 foot from the edge of the upper sandbar. So it's missing. So what we had to do is we had to reconstruct a stand so we could safely stand at the same level that Roger would be standing at on the upper sandbar. the pretty much the 1964 floodplain. Okay, once we got that installed, and then we got, okay, so what height would Roger be standing? Now Roger is 5'3". He's not a tall guy.
No, definitely not.
And was he standing? Was he kneeling? Was he sitting against something when he took this footage? So that to be determined. But that distance to the stumps, we have an idea where it is. So what we were trying to do, mostly Rowdy and Daniel Perez were looking at it, was if we can line up 352 with the current position, then maybe we can estimate based on where Patty might have been, how tall it was. Now, everybody's been doing that. Some people have been taking the track sizes and stacking them on top and estimating the height.
Yeah.
But when I look at the Smiley stump, it's like 41 inches tall and it's about 20 inches wide. It's not real big. And every time I look at that stump, what's left of it, and approximately where Patty would be, I don't think Patty's over 7 foot tall. It just doesn't make sense based on just looking at it from there. But I'm not a mathematician. But digressing back to the measurements. So the idea was, if we can superimpose a picture that we can take now on top of the other picture, we can have an idea approximately size and distance, whatever.
Sure.
But you got to remember, what the part that we have to remember is that if you can determine the distance and you can determine the millimeters, the lenses,
with the lens, right?
then you can probably have a general idea of height of the subject. So it's all mathematical. So the experimentation we started doing in 2012, which was pretty quick, it was just like trying to film from the approximate location with the lens sizes. But just last October, Rowdy Perez and Dustin and myself and a reporter guy that came up, we were able to rotate the lenses, the 15 millimeter lens, the 20 millimeter lens, and the 25 millimeter lens, and take photos and do a little bit of videoing through that to see distances, to see if it makes sense. But you couldn't see the background because it's dark in there, right? It's all overgrown with forests. So Rowdy had the brilliant idea of putting these big old spotlights on artifacts way at the back of the film site and some on the stumps. So Rowdy got to his position where you could take 352 and line it just about right and match it to those lights that are on the artifacts. So we were able to figure out that our distance was pretty good, but maybe a little farther back, but it looked pretty good. But you couldn't see a person. Even though the person was wearing a white hat, you couldn't see them very well in the footage. So next time we go up there, we have to make sure we can illuminate them with other lights. So when you line up the background trees, you got that person that's trying to estimate where Patty was, and that's going to show up, and that's going to help us. So when you're at the platform shooting north towards the Smiley stump, it's like, was Patty at 102 feet? Was he at 108 feet?
Yeah.
So if you get those distances, you can kind of superimpose them and give a general idea of approximately, I've been saying about a minimal size, which is kind of nice, but it'll give us an idea of whether or not those sizes tend to match better based on the lenses. So the question always is, was it the 15 millimeter? Was it the 20? Was it the 25? So the last experiment that Rowdy and Daniel were doing, 20 was looking okay, but 15 might, I don't know. We need to redo a few things, but 25 was definitely not going to work.
So this is, yeah,
good stuff.
I just wanted to add this comment from Matt, who says either 20 or 25. I go with fixed focus. Now, we had an interesting discussion. Matt is a professional photographer, and he's kind of we had a discussion when we were with him recently in Florida with Tate. We were talking about, the Patterson-Gimlin film, of course, and he seemed to think it was probably fixed focus. And I know Rowdy, when I saw him this summer as well, and you guys, he was talking about trying to find that sort of lens. And I know there's been some talk of that. So just interesting kind of thought. But you say that you think neither 20 or 25 sort of works?
Well, I'm saying 25 is not going to work based on what I've been eavesdropping with Rowdy and Perez talking. 20 has a better chance of it.
Interesting.
But
yeah.
But again, it's just like I would hold that thought until we did some more experimenting this summer coming up, so we can iron out a few things. Like maybe we need to get a little farther back, or maybe 15 could be it, or 20. So it's nothing. It's not 25. It's between 15 and it's between 20. Kind of favoring 20 a little bit, but that's kind of where it's at right now.
It's interesting, and I mean, that's one of those things that it's what 50, some 50 plus years, 55 years at this point since the film, and there's still a lot of debate going on about it, and I think that's a good point that you mentioned. It, whether or not that's a real creature and that film is a hoax or not is irrelevant to the overall story. I mean, obviously, it'd be nice to be able to get some closure one way or another, but regardless, that footage is one of the most famous pieces of footage in the world. I mean, it's been analyzed probably at this point more times maybe than the Zapruder film of the JFK assassination. Everyone recognizes it. It's recognizable. It's very influential. How many people got into Bigfoot simply because of that film? So just that overall significance, I think, is interesting. And that I think is definitely something that you guys have been working on. I think that legacy of safeguarding that site in a way, which I think is interesting, and whether or not it's real or not, we may never know the truth. I mean, that could be, but if you guys inch closer, I think that's definitely interesting. And Matt has an interesting comment here. He says, people don't realize with either of those lenses, that makes the encounter very, very close. Interesting.
Yeah. It's, when we first started picking that location to grid out, we were like within 30 feet of where Bill Munn said frame number 1 was supposed to be when we started doing that. And 30 feet isn't that far away. It's just
that's
right
really
there.
not.
And when you're standing on that platform and you have somebody go stand approximately where Patty is, you're looking over there and you're going, that's right there. So the question is, how close was it when they first saw? And then how close was it when Roger was running to that position and setting up to take that one shot there? I mean, it's pretty close. And when I think about it, is how close do you really want to be to anything like that? And
that's true.
Without getting into debate whether the creatures exist or not, is the whole phenomena was pretty fascinating. But we were told once a long time ago, it's just time I got 20% of my battery, so I guess I'm good. So I'll just unplug it and put my ears out back in. So the interesting thing is this site, it's like it gets lost, right? Okay. You think it's the most important site ever, like Roswell or whatever.
Sure.
But people don't all agree where it was. And then now we got that ironed out and we're done. Let's walk away. Mission solved. But the more we spend up there, the more more questions we get, the more time we're looking for answers. So we're not done, I guess, looking or searching for other clues up there. And there's still answers there. Like we could still probably figure out not 100%, but a more reasonable guesstimation where Patty might have been, or a guesstimation of how small she was.
Yeah.
And those are always nice things to add. So it's really not over. There's still more information to be extracted. I was looking for a better word to use than extraction, but to be extracted from the site, there's still more information that we can still collect. And I think it's great. It's just like, can you imagine 10 years ago? Well, let me rephrase that. 20 years ago, when the interest of it had waned, where people were forgetting where it was. There's a handful of people
incredible.
Still had an idea, but it's almost like we're done with this. We're moving on. It's not that important. And then they have this big symposium, and then you realize that, oh my gosh, we are losing some good information. How do we not know where this place was anymore? How do people get confused? Well, we do. Now that it's been GPSed, we should be able to find it again, right?
But it's interesting, that the fact that you said like it was closer to the event, the 70s, and obviously the 70s were practically right after it happened. The 80s and the 90s were very close to when it happened in terms of years, and that interest waned. And now it's almost as if the interest there's more interest in it now. I mean, people say, what's the point? It's been hashed over a million times. People have a lot of those on both sides, very sort of those comments that kind of close off the discussion. Oh, that was proven to be a hoax years ago, or oh,
Oh yeah.
that's proven to be real years ago. It's like those definitive statements when it's really the investigation's still going on, and uh, not everything that we know about that film. We still have a lot to learn, I'd say. And it's good that there are people like yourselves that are kind of taking that task, because a lot of people are focused in other areas, and that's fine. But I do have a question here for you from Joe Turry, who asks, "Hey Robert, do you know if anyone ever found more evidence of Patty?"
I mean, at the film site location, or
I guess I don't know if in general, or I mean, there obviously with the footage there was footage and there were footprints that were retrieved. Were there any sightings that happened afterwards that you were aware of or anything like that?
no, and not directly of that. Prior to there were some sightings in the area, and there's been a few sightings afterwards, like Louse Camp. We've had some visitors at Louse Camp. I've been out and about, and I've talked before about hearing ladies giggling, and I go to see what's going on, and they're talking and giggling. There's nobody there, or you're sitting up someplace playing your flute, and you get something playing a flute back, or
That's yeah.
Things that just happen that are kind of unusual, so to speak. But I haven't heard any big reports say, yeah, we just saw Patty running across the road the other day. It's a lot of wildlife up there. When you guys were up there, you guys had some stuff that was kind of unusual going on. And I've had it at Louse Camp, and I've had it at near the film site. I've had it walking by myself on places
Sure.
where, you're not alone. You're not the only person up there. And the sounds you hear is like something walking around on 2 legs versus 4 legs. It's a little different. So it makes you wonder. But seeing it, I haven't seen it. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
So yeah, and that's something I did want to talk about a little bit, is some of the weirdness that's kind of associated with that area. And I've heard quite a few stories that folks have told about in that area. I mean, we had some weird stuff happen that, I mean, again, I cannot explain, as I mentioned earlier. It's not definitive of anything. It was just plain weird. Jonathan Easley had that strange sound that he had experienced there. Kip had the thing that would, hit the top of his tent kind of thing. And I heard a story, and the flute story, did that happen to you, or was that somebody else?
No, that one of them did happen to me. I was out.
Was
there,
that?
It was Jamie. It was that we're at the pretty much the berm.
The Spanish thing, was that with you?
Yeah, that was with me.
Okay, so would you want to talk about that?
I'll talk about the berm, maybe not the Spanish one.
Okay.
I give people half the story because I don't want to repeat the first part of that.
Sure.
Anyhow, I'll share it with you in private, but so going back to the playing that the flute, was one thing I do when I get to my location is I have an elk caller, so I'll do a few elk calls, and then I'll take my flute and I'll play some really loud sort of echoes in the canyon, and then I'll kick back and I'll just do kind of playing up the scale, down the scale. The more you practice, the better you get. So I got to keep practicing. So I just kind of play a little bit. And then Jamie was there, and he had a recorder going off his vehicle just down from where I was. And he goes, "Hey, Robert, come here. So I stopped playing. I went over there. He goes, "I'm hearing something down the canyon." So I'm standing there listening to him, and I'm listening, trying to hear what he's hearing down there, because it's like 300, 400 feet down. It's relatively steep, and it could be something down there. And then I hear something that sounds like a flute playing back. And Jamie caught it on the recorder. But now I'm not saying that Sasquatches are playing flutes down in the canyon, responding to what I did. But it's just kind of interesting that it sounded very much like a flute. And there are birds in the area that do make noises. But this one sounded a bit different. And it's like, that's interesting. But he did get it on recording.
I mean, did it sound at all? Did it sound at all like as if somebody, like a human, was mimicking a flute noise or was imitating a flute noise?
It sounded like it could have been a flute, but birds do have that fluting type calls back. But we hadn't heard any of the birds, and then in association with my playing, we heard that, and that was later in the afternoon, and it was going to be dark soon. But it was kind of unusual, and it's just like. It's just one of those things that you go, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Or like going back to hearing the Buenos Dias, coming from outside when you're trying to sleep in your tent. You're like, okay, joke's over. What's that? It could have been, and you're thinking, oh, maybe it was Rowdy who was supposed to be parked at the top of the hill. who never came down. And to access where you are, the bottom of the canyon is pretty isolated. One of the major access points is you're on that road and you're at the berm at the end of it, and you walk all the way down there. And so if anybody drives down, you eventually you'll hear them. It's just too steep to be kind of, it's not impossible to go down the hills because we did it before. It's just dangerous. So that's just a couple things that make you wonder. And then of course, I was with Bart. We were over at Louse Camp and we did some calls and we're hiding in the bushes, and something climbs down the hill on the way to Louse Camp and we can hear it. And then Bobo was there at the time, and I think Jeremy, one of Bobo's friends, with Jamie, one of Bobo's friends, was there, and well, one of the guys said they saw it moving in between our location and where they were, in between the site and that old road cut trail section. And Bobo talked about seeing a little skinny one looking down at him.
That's
when
right.
He was there at one time. And well, I've been there before with other people and started hearing these kind of really loud bass sounds, like kind of boom, 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 boom. Like, who's got the music going? And you don't know what, without seeing something, you can't, it's hard to say exactly what it is. So you have something unusual that sounds like, and it could be, but there comes the burden of the proof is, do you know it is or is not? And that's where I run into the obstacles, and where I'm not going to jump up and down and say, yeah, I just had a Sasquatch. Yeah, it was cool. I don't know, because I didn't see it. I heard some stuff that's unusual. Yeah. So maybe that's a cop-out answer, but that's where I got to hold it. Because if I would jump to conclusions every time I heard something, I mean, how many people would actually say, oh yeah, Leiterman actually saw something? If he goes out every trip and has an encounter, after a while you can say, maybe he has an encounter in his head, or maybe it's the natural sounds that he's interpreting as such. So, like, if you're going to go find a film site, you can't start with preconceived ideas. You got to pretty much let the facts present themselves to you and start from the beginning and work your way through until you're absolutely sure. So I guess that being skeptical in a way helps with research. How's that?
I totally agree. And I think that's absolutely the mindset researchers should have. I mean, I've been out there plenty of times, and majority of times you have nothing Sasquatch related as far as we know that happens. It's encounter plenty of other wildlife and other things in the woods. Sometimes people, unfortunately, and very weird people that are doing weird things and illegal things. That's never fun. But I think it's just important to have that sort of level-headedness. And I think we're inundated with a lot of the reality TV stuff where these programs fake noises and they fake encounters all the time, because that brings the revenue up, that brings the interest in a program up, whereas the reality is not like that. And that being said, even when you do have strange things that you just can't explain happen, you just can't assume it's Bigfoot. Like I said, with some of the stuff we experienced at Louse Camp and in that area with the mysterious rock slide, which could have just been a natural rock slide, or that weird whoop-like noise that we got, which, after talking to everybody in camp, nobody said it was them or any of their dogs, these kinds of things. But there's ways to explain things. It's not always Bigfoot. And I think the problem is too, when you go to an area like Bluff Creek, it's you're usually most people that are going there are Bigfooters, right? So they already have sort of a notion that Bigfoot's out there. So it may be easy to attribute Bigfoot to something weird that happens. Whereas, you have to be aware, I'm coming to this place with a bias about Bigfoot. I need to be aware of that and objectively kind of come here and visit the place.
People want to have an experience, people would love the experience. Yeah. I think most people like having experiences versus not. And I always say, be careful what you ask for. But if you want so much to have an experience and you don't have an experience, you're like, but let's make it personal. Let's find an experience, because I have an experience every time I go out, but it's not quite a Sasquatch experience. It's a personal growth. It's learning something new, and it's kind of neat. I just wanted to touch upon these reality shows that people have, like Finding Bigfoot was one, Expedition Bigfoot. I think, and also the one out of West Virginia, something Monsters. Yeah. Oh,
Mountain Monsters. Yeah, which is like a parody show, basically. They admit that it's completely fake, but some of these other shows do not. They claim that they're real, right?
Well, that's how I look at it. I look at it as a form of entertainment. And some of it's very entertaining, some of it's not. Like, without mentioning any names of shows, I watch it for the entertainment value, because I've been on research expeditions before. I spent a lot of time out in the woods doing different things, and most of my time is pretty quiet. You don't hear anything. You get the bond with your friends, but you do find an experience that you can take home, and an escape from a reality, which we call life. And very seldom do I have these experiences where it makes me really wonder, like, what the heck was that? Or what's that going on? When you do have them, they're blessings or the curses, depends on how you interpret them. But it's a gift, and I take it for what it is. But if you go out every day and you have these experiences, then you got to start questioning. Like, if you have a reality show that's out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and every episode, crazy stuff happens. Well, are they interpreting this crazy stuff to influence it? Maybe it is a Sasquatch related, or there's stuff out there we just don't know much about, and you can't explain. Crazy stuff.
There's weird stuff, absolutely,
all the time.
And I mean, they often have to leave things on a cliffhanger to bring in the next week, audience for the next week's show, and that's just how it happens with a lot of entertainment. And I know this. I create content. We do obviously these kinds of documentaries, and we try to make them entertaining, but we really, really try to strive to never embellish or fake or anything like that. And I speak for myself and the rest of my crew. That's just not the way we do it, and we don't like to put words in people's mouths or twist the way things happen. And I want you to feel the magic of coming to a place like Bluff Creek, and we try to kind of bring you along. And because when I think about that, you're mentioning going out there, there's a lot more things than Bigfoot. There's a lot more things you can learn. You learn about yourself. You learn about the people you go with. I mean, in an area like Bluff Creek, you got to trust the people you're with. I mean, you could be in a life or death situation like that in an area as remote as Bluff Creek. So, the camaraderie, when I think of, my time at last camp at Bluff Creek, amazing. Those memories I have, I will cherish forever. It makes me want to go back there, just sitting up on that back road up on the heading towards Laird Meadow, that road where it kind of drops off on one side. I don't know the name of the road exactly, but you take that left out of Louse Camp, just sitting up there at night and then spending some time up there. It's just, there's no one else, you're the only souls for, dozens and dozens of miles. It's just a special feeling. And that place is just, it's special. And that's, I think, what you can kind of learn from getting out in the field and just enjoying and learning about the other wildlife and nature that's around you, because it's not all Bigfoot. But if Bigfoot is an environment like that, it has to somehow interact with it. So the more you learn about the environment, the more you overall benefit yourself.
Yeah, the place you're describing is the kind of the bottom section of 12 and 10. It comes from Onion Mountain and Onion Lake, and they in the Willow Creek movie, some of those last calls I had to make, I had to walk up that road by myself all the way up to that one exposed spot just to make a few more calls down there. It's kind of funny because I've laid on that road and watched the stars and listened to the echo many times before. In the filming of Willow Creek, it was my job to walk up by myself in the darkness, knowing we're trying to film a scene in a tent, walking all the way up there, waiting for my cue to get the last calls. And as I'm standing there giving out these last calls, listen to the echo, and I have a headset on so I can hear what's going on in the tent. That was whole part of the deal. And it kind of makes you wonder, if it's like, okay, I made all these noises now, and now I got to walk back to camp by myself.
Right.
And we've been there before doing that. So it's like, okay, maybe we drew something in, because that's happened before. We drew in something because we were walking around our campsite.
I mean,
we are making a movie.
It's like,
movie about Bigfoot. Yeah.
No, sorry to keep cutting you off there, but no, you're right. I mean, for a lot of people that don't know, so that Willow Creek movie, a lot of those Bigfoot vocalizations and noises you hear are actually Robert doing them from the bushes or from, as you mentioned, halfway up the mountain. And it's a cool kind of feeling knowing where that took place once you see it. But I think part of that area, what really intrigues me is that gate, to drive in is essentially closed from, what is it, usually October, November, end of October, November, up until the snow melts in May. Is that correct? Right around there?
Yeah, that would be very correct. It's like the hunting, right after hunting season, which is in October, right after October 20th. They close the gates. They lock it because of a port order procedure has a virus. I don't know if the virus is a proper word, but it it kills Port Orford cedars, and it's a waterborne pathogen, and it travels down the creek. It travels on tires, it travels on our boots of our feet. The wildlife passes it all over the place. So there's been a big die-off in Port Orford cedars up there. So to protect that, they lock these gates, and they don't reopen them till, like after June sometimes.
I thought it was because of the snow, but that's
it.
interesting.
No. Well, the snow also helps keep people out because you can't get through it. But the gates in certain areas, like on the way 12 and 13, get shut down. And then it's just like you got to wait till the gates are open. And you're looking at like 8 months sometimes in between the last visit.
Yeah, that's
because of the Humboldt marten. They're trying to think about preserving areas in the Six Rivers National Forest that Humboldt marten exists, but there's already a time period of 8 months that help protect the Humboldt marten up there and keep it a pretty much isolated habitat. And so we go down there and we have our camera set up for 8 months, and we got check, and we get some pretty wonderful surprises on the, no Sasquatches, but a lot of other stuff on there. So that whole thing to think about is it's pretty cool area. So it's not technically a wilderness area, but it's kind of fits the psychological aspect of a wilderness area because it's closed to public access.
Yeah,
and I just want to throw this out there.
Go ahead.
I'll also throw this thing is when John Green came by after the filming in '67. When John Green came back up to check on the film site where the patty was seen, it was like 8 months since the guys left up there. So, and he went to go check the foot impressions, and he said he still saw some foot impressions in the soft sand and some plaster spots. That's 8 months later. So that's just an example of something happens and you come back 8 months later, it's a whole different world. And so that place is closed off to public access for about 8 months.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. That's a good point to bring up.
That's what made me, I thought it was initially, no, it's totally fine. I initially thought it was mostly because of the snow, because they want people getting stuck up in that area. I know lots of other spots, even here in the mountains, or I've seen down south in certain areas in the Appalachians and obviously in the Rocky Mountains, that they close off entire sections of these roads up in the mountains just because they don't want to deal with people getting stuck up there or trying to drive through giant snow squalls and snow piles. And that is pretty interesting. But to me, it's interesting because, you have an area that's closed off for most of the year then. And how many times do you have people coming through? I mean, sure, large groups of people, you have the annual Bluff Creek kind of get together. I understand there's a kind of a hoopla or a Yurok kind of get together and lost camp every once in a while. And aside from that, you maybe have the odd campers going in there in the summer, but really not that much traffic. So if you're a creature or a group of creatures that want to stay hidden, I mean, you have that entire area for the whole year to pretty much do whatever you want, right?
Yeah, and when the snow comes, it stays for a while up there, and so we get a lot of snow activity, which also hampers travel. But think of it this way: if you're going over to Elk Valley, it's a 30-mile road. The Go Road's 30 miles long. Yeah, and right just before the turnoff for Louse Camp at mile marker 17, the highest part of the road is about mile marker 14, 15-ish. And that's the highest part, and it's over 5,000. So snow gets packed there pretty well. So that eliminates a lot of the access there. And like any government agency, you have limited staffing on the off season. If you limit access, you can manage your resources better too. So that's a natural phenomenon for managers to start closing down access so they can manage what they have. But so it's not just the snow; it's just a practice of trying to keep people out of certain areas so you can stay up with them. It's just kind of the way practices go.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's why you get a lot of those stories of illicit activity up in those hills too. I guess it's a little further south in Humboldt County with, the pot and all that stuff. And the reputation that area has, which I think is interesting from a sort of true crime perspective. But largely, I mean, once you get sort of past Willow Creek up in that area, there's a lot less, I'd say, going on. I mean, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot there in terms of civilization or anything like that. And that Go Road, man, that is such a fascinating story, how they tried to make a highway that linked up basically the Redwood Coast to that interior part of the Six Rivers kind of national forest, what's now the forest. And they almost got to 90% of it completed, and they had to cut it off right towards the end.
Well, actually, it's a 6 mile section that's not that's not completed, but it's actually an old Jeep road. So it's a trail dividing that. But yeah, the goal is Gasky, Orleans. Gasky is that town off of 299, and Orleans is off of 90. I want to say 96. So that was connecting the dots, so you can access through, mostly to harvest timber out. But the Sacred High Country is that one area up towards Elk Valley. They want to maintain a place where you could practice religiously and keep it from being modernized and kind of reduce access. So
makes sense.
I personally think it's great that it's closed off. It's like the boundary of a wilderness area up there too, the Siskiyous. So it's a nice
amazing,
little wild spot. Yeah.
It really is. You kind of drive up and you get to the end of this road and you're just kind of like, wow, this feels like the end of the earth in a certain aspect. And you just look out and there's nothing. And we went up there at night, must have been 3-4 in the morning. We were there till almost sunrise and we drove all the way in, and you're just looking on either side and there's that sort of drop off. And then when you look at it on Google Earth or a satellite map, you see where the road ends where you were standing. And then you look, there's this valley, and then you find the spot where the road is on the other side where that pavement ends. And I always wonder, what if you had one group of people come in on that side and the other people go on the other side, and you try to do some blasts and see if you guys can hear any call blasts from either side. But when you're on that coast to get to basically the end of the go road, it's a very long journey, either going north towards Happy Camp or down towards Eureka and into Willow Creek, right? I mean, that's a 2-3 hour drive at least, either way.
It's a long drive when you do that way. It would have been convenient to make a loop, but I'm glad it's not, because some areas need to be protected and left as they are.
It adds to that charm. Well, that's the thing. It adds to the charm that you can only really get to this spot by taking a huge detour around, and it just adds to that sort of getting in there. If there was just a road that was easy, let's just cut through and we'll get to it, save a lot of time, shave a few hours off. I think part of the experience is seeing how long it takes you to get into a place like Louse Camp or even to the Go Road, and it's a heck of a long time.
It's a destination. It's not a thoroughfare. It's like
You're
going there to your destination. You're not just stopping off on the way somewhere else. And that's the charm. It's a wild area. I want to say close to 1 million acres in Six Rivers National Forest. It's underused. It doesn't get a lot of visitation. It's kind of a slender area that's backed against the Siskiyous. Well, that's the north. You have the Klamath National Forest, and you have the Marble Mountain areas towards the Trinities. So there's a lot of wilderness areas in that area. So northwestern California, it's still a pretty wild place.
Yeah.
And that's what the sightings were. That's where, the Patterson film was, and that's where the, Jerry Crew, the casting thing,
of course,
the stories before. It's got a history. So I kind of call it ground zero for, the Bigfoot stuff on the West Coast. But,
it is. It totally is.
Yeah.
I think there's just that feeling and knowing, it's one of those places that was one of the last areas that was broken into essentially after in the lower 48. It was one of the last really big wilderness areas that hadn't been logged or touched until the 1950s, which really isn't that long ago. If you look at the history of the US or the history of the world, that's a small amount of time. So, 70 plus 80 years or so at this point, 70, 80 years. And that's essentially when those roads were put in, when people started, kind of getting into that area. And it's still remained from that time period to this day. There are forest roads that go through there. It's a little more tame, but it's still a very rugged wilderness. And as I mentioned, you could fall off the cliff on one of those roads and just be gone. I mean, disappear right off the map.
Well, I guess the vultures would start circling. They know where to look there. But yeah. It's a big rocky slide area, so rocks fall across that section that you're talking 12 and 10 all the time, and rocks will bury you, I guess. Yeah, right. It's a cool place, and I'm kind of blessed to be this close to it and being able to spend the time that I do. And I spend way too much time there as it is. People tell me, Robert, there's so many other places you can go to. Why do you keep spending your time going back over to Bluff Creek area? Well, it's peaceful. It doesn't get a lot of visitation. It's nice. I'm comfortable with it. I get good feelings when I'm down there most of the time.
Sure.
And I do miss seeing a whole bunch of other areas. I really like the Cascades.
Of
kind
course.
of a cool place to be at. I spent a little time in the Olympics, not a lot, but I'd like to, get to know that place better. So life is short. You can't be everywhere. And you pick something that works. Like I talk to other people doing research, is searching all over the world to look for something. It's not as effective as staying in one area and managing that one area and studying out your research and seeing what pops up. That's the most effective way to research, but it's not as fun, I guess, getting to see new areas and experience new things. Like yourself, you're all over the place.
I know, and it's a blessing and a curse, and I can't complain. I mean, we have been so lucky to be able to go to some of these locations, and that's the problem. And then is you want to go back to some of them, right? And you can't go back to all of them. I mean, we just spent this time in Florida,
yeah.
Beautiful areas, and we called you while we were down there as well in Big Cypress, and it's such a different environment from a place like Bluff Creek. They're both amazing, but there's just something really special about Bluff Creek, and I really hope to make it back this summer. We're planning on doing some stuff out in the Pacific Northwest, in other areas, Washington and California, other parts of California. But there's just Bluff Creek is definitely a special spot, and I can see why people have been going back year after year. And it's amazing you're close to such a great area, and for people that are on the West Coast, it is totally worth it. Doesn't matter if you're up by Seattle or down by LA, go and take the trip. It's totally worth it. Go to Bluff Creek. If you're even remotely into Bigfoot or you just like getting out in the woods, you will not be disappointed. It's a place. I mean, I can't say, I can keep talking about all night how much I liked it. It was really just an amazing spot. And you guys have been doing some fantastic work with just the film site and just that area in general. So I applaud you, and I'm a little jealous that you get to go there as often as you do, but that's just the nature of how it goes,
Oh, whew, you say the nicest things.
So I actually do have a question here from Tristan, who is actually last week's guest. So it's pretty cool. We've had last week's guest and next week's guest both in the chat tonight. So that's awesome. Patrick Vaughn was in it earlier, and he'll be next week's guest. But wrong question. Cool. So Tristan asked a couple of questions for Robert. Has he had a sighting in the Bluff Creek area, or has there been any recent sightings from the area where Roger took the film?
No, I haven't seen a Bigfoot. I've had rocks. As a matter of fact, at Twin Lakes about 2 years ago, I was playing my flute again. There's the connection, making obnoxious noises and upsetting somebody. And I was sitting by the creek again. I blow it really loud and do the high pitched echoes. Not the creek, Twin Lakes. And then I was all done with that. I just started playing. And while I was doing that, I heard Bobo carrying on. And I thought he was saying, play it louder, but it's just like, knock it off. It sucks. But anyhow, so I heard that noise and I played a little bit longer and they were still talking. So I went over to see what's going on. And while Bobo was in the back of his pickup truck, a rock flew down from the hillside off to his left. He was facing the back of the truck, and the lake was off to his right, and hit the road behind him and rode down the hill. And he didn't see anybody. And the interesting thing is the hill is not steep enough to have a rock roll down the hill.
A natural roll.
It had to have been tossed down. And we're at a location where we didn't see anybody else. And again, you're on top of this ridge and there's no other vehicles in that one area. So, and you hear cars coming. So that was unusual. And that was within a couple of years, I guess, of that when we started doing a podcast. We actually, I interviewed them up at Twin Lake, Bart and Bobo, for the podcast, the Bluff Creek podcast. But that was during that trip, and hearing sounds, or what's maybe music, or maybe not, maybe birds, or hearing words that sound like "Buenos dias" coming outside your tent in an area where you're not supposed to have anybody else, or walking down that same road at the very top, walking down to your tent location by yourself, waiting for a couple other people to show up, and you hear footsteps, you stop, and then they stop a couple steps after that. You listen, hear nothing, you walk again. A few minutes later, you hear the footsteps, you stop, they take a couple steps, and then they
weirdness,
stop, and then you say, I'm done with this, and you keep walking, and then you hear it again, but then you just keep walking. And then you get to a point where you flip your pack off, you pull out your pepper spray, and you're sitting there going, well, if it keeps going this way, I'll see it.
Yeah.
And I'm ready because it goes down.
Oh, I think we unfortunately just...
Goodbye.
Oh, hello.
No idea.
Oh, somebody doesn't want you to tell the story.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, it froze out there for a second. I don't know what was going on.
Oh yeah. And then there was this elephant, and then it ran off, and that was pretty much it. I have no idea what it was. It just made noise. It unnerving to be followed. I wouldn't say stalked, but it was heavy. It wasn't. Yeah, could have been a bear following the game trails that I happened to be on its way, but it paralleled me, and then when I pulled off, it pulled off too, which is kind of unusual. But
well, see, I
hope that answered his question.
Yeah, that's creepy regardless. I mean, if you were in the woods and you're just being followed by either a bear or a mountain lion or even a human, I mean, whatever it is, that's not a pleasant feeling, as you mentioned. Now, that does answer his second question, which kind of was about, has Robert heard any speech language in the Bluff Creek? And you mentioned the Buenos Dias thing, which is just, that's so unnerving. I mean, especially when you know that there's possible cartel kind of stuff going on up there. It's a little creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that makes you unnerving. I guess I mentioned earlier when I was walking up down Bluff Creek from the film site towards Louse Camp, there was the ladies talking and giggling until I said, "Hey," and I walked over there, and then it got quiet. That's always a little unnerving there.
The creek,
so again,
the creek
what do you
speaks. You know, the river there speaks and makes little noises too. We heard that, and the weird kind of feeling at Louse Camp, because and we talked about this when we were there. When we slept at the film site, it was myself, Eli, Tate, Jonathan Easley, and Ron Reed, and his dog Bandit. And I think you may have been up at the cell site, but I know Rowdy was camping up at the berm. We never got a creepy feeling at the film site. The film site, we were it just did not have a spook factor. But down at Louse Camp, you're in that sort of bowl, and there's the flowing river. The creepiness factor is real in Louse Camp as compared to other areas of Bluff Creek. It was really interesting. So I found that kind of fascinating. But here's one more question from Tristan. He asks, when they were filming Willow Creek, did they experience any weird activity? Thanks, Alex and Robert.
No. It was pretty, nothing unusual. The only weird activity is what we were generating for the film.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which is some creepy stuff. It's a creepy movie.
Well, the tent scene it lasted. There was no cuts on the tent scene. It was the whole thing. We had headsets. At first, I was the advisor. Then I become a little bit more than that. Become the special effects guy for calls, whatever. But it got to a point where I would suggest, hey, you thought about this? They go, yeah, let's go do it. But at the tent scene where they're all in the tent, we're outside trying to be creepy, I guess. And pushing on the tent was something I suggested. And every time they would talk or do something, I would make a noise. Because that's what happens in real life is every time there's a call, Robert's yakking away, doesn't get to hear it because the timing is perfect. So I was fun with that, but that was all something we did. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Tristan says the tent scene is my favorite. Yeah, it's a long shot, so it's a long take. So there was no cuts. And everything had to be perfect, so it makes sense you'd have the headsets to coordinate and talk about stuff. Kevin says,
fun.
Buenos Dias, Pablo Sasquabar. Kevin's always got some funny stuff to say. But yeah, man. Well, kind of as we start wrapping up here, I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us. It's been super interesting, and it definitely has me wanting to get back to Bluff Creek, and I really hope I can make it back this summer. And yeah, it's been awesome.
What is this?
Do you have anything else you'd like to add about, kind of what you're up to or anything else going on? I have linked the book as well as the Bluff Creek Project podcast in the description below, folks. But anything else you'd like to mention?
Yeah. I have other books I wrote. I had a recently published one called The Gabriel's Legacy. It's a fictional, but it's about third generation being it's about this kid taking where his dad left off. His dad was able to do things that people thought were impossible, and it's kind of a little spiritual effect. Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's got some angels and devils in it. But
cool.
The other project, and another one I did a while back is called On a Kren. It's a Gift of the Ancient Trees. It's got fairies and rangers, and that was fun. Those are all fiction. But one of the big projects we're trying to get done is I wrote books 20 years ago, the Bigfoot trilogy and the Bigfoot mystery.
freezing out again.
And we're trying to make it an audiobook where you could listen to the actors' voices with the background ambient sounds. And we're trying to get that one done this year, but that's a fun project. And my narrator is Kip Morrill.
Oh, right on.
He's pretty good in his voice. He's gonna be
Kip
the
is awesome.
in the Kip Morrill. He's out there. He's gonna be the voice in the book, and he's gonna be the narrator. So it's gonna be a fun project, and our goal is to have one done this year, and so hopefully we'll be able to do that. But that's just the latest project I'm kind of working on.
Kip's awesome. I got to get him on the show at some point as well. Real nice guy. I think somebody. Yeah, right. I know. Speaking of Bigfooter of the Year, somebody did have a question earlier. I forgot to get to it, but they were wondering about who gives the title of Bigfooter of the Year, which you currently are.
Yeah, it's easy. If you have a lot of money, you can be Bigfooter of the Year. Kip, he's retired now.
Just slipping some, right.
Yeah, he slipped that, and they give it to him. No, Daniel Perez has a newsletter, and he's had a newsletter for quite a while.
It's one of the oldest ones, right? Oh, it's amazing. I recommend people going. Yeah, he's been doing it for quite a long time. I recommend people check it out. Bigfoot Times. It's awesome.
Yeah, and so he's the one who pretty much decides. It didn't hurt being about the film site. He's got a soft spot in his heart about the film site. So back in 2011, Steve and I we wanted together because that's when we pretty much confirmed the film site. There's really should have been 4 of us on there, but Rowdy and Ian didn't get mentioned in 2011. And just recently, I think it's because of the book, which is nice. It was a fun book to write, a lot of information, and I think that's the reason the Bluff Creek Project, and we kind of got it. I know I say we, because it's you can't do anything by yourself, so you're part of a team. Because your name's on something because you wrote the book. Support, feedback, like Stephen did the editing for it. He also wrote the introduction, and I mentioned that Rowdy did a little write-up for it, and Jamie did 2 articles in there. So I still call it a group project.
Sure.
But the problem with group project is we have too many people with their fingers in it. You don't get anything done. So that's the bad thing about it.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, is that this kind of thing?
Yeah. So you just tell them to suck it up, and you're not the author, I am, and just tough.
There you go. Strong arm it.
And there you go. And that's you finally get it published. But I hope that answered the question for that. Yeah,
totally. Awesome. And like I said, definitely check out Bigfoot Times. Daniel's been doing it for a long time. I got to get Daniel on at some point too. But check out the books, guys. Absolutely amazing. Just a few little comments here. People are saying, enjoyed listening. Kevin says, good stuff again. Robert is interesting and level-headed. A pleasure to listen to. Thanks, Alex and Robert, for the show tonight. Thank you, Kevin, for tuning in as always. And
thanks.
Hope you're doing well up there in Canada. Rebecca says, Kip would be an awesome guest. What's going on, Rebecca? Yeah, I will talk to Kip. I haven't even told him he's going to be on the show, but he'll be on the show. Don't worry. We'll make it work. Yeah. Patrick Vaughn says, great show, guys. Going to crash. Awesome. So, guys, Patrick Vaughn will be our guest next week, so definitely tune into that. My Eyes says, Thank you. Good night. And Angel Nolan says, great show. Thank you, Alex and Robert. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Robert. And as I mentioned, I have linked the book down below in the description, as well as the Bluff Creek Project podcast, which a good friend of the show, Tate, who's been on here many times, is involved with yourself. And if you see a lot of these films regarding Bluff Creek or stuff like Finding Bigfoot, or as we mentioned, Willow Creek, know that Robert and a lot of the Bluff Creek Project guys are probably involved in some way or another, which is really cool. So we thank them obviously for the great work they've done with the film site. And folks, like I said, if you're thinking about going to Bluff Creek, definitely get out there. It is totally worth it. If you can get out there, do it. It's amazing, and these guys do a great job. So again, Robert, thanks so much for coming on.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you guys, everyone in the chat, as always. This has been Sasquatch Out of the Shadows Live. Hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Looking forward to next week's show, where we'll be talking to Patrick Vaughn. Until then, guys, everyone have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you guys later.